The Book of How to Move by Lomonaaren. 1. Ascending. Potter ascends in a sweet, subtle, smooth curve, up and up to the height of the skies, which spread themselves above him with a colour that steals Draco's breath. Or maybe that's Potter himself, flying with his head hanging back, his smile on his face. Draco knows it's there, although it's invisible from this distance and this angle. His hands wrapped lightly, so lightly around the shaft of the broom, as he could spread them and fly without it, using his fingers like feathers. Draco watches Potter, waiting for the moment when he'll level off, because he has to, because there's only so high he can fly before the air starts stinging his lungs. But he doesn't. As long as Draco can see. Up he lifts like a lark, flying and flying and flying, and then he vanishes into the blue. Draco closes one hand into a fist and turns his head away. "You're right, Draco." That's Gregory, who keeps closer and more silent this year, all the time, really since the room of requirement. Draco gives him a half smile and nods. "Yeah, just watching Potter. He'll be even harder to beat if I don't know how he flies." That's a lie he gives. Everything about it is a lie. From how he feels, to the reason he's watching, to the name he uses. They'll have time that evening to cry the name out, in soft puffs of breath that vanish into the air surrounding them, like Harry vanishing into the sky. 2. Swaggering. Harry can't remember now if he thought that Draco Malfoy swaggered the first time he saw him. Then he remembers that the first time he saw Draco, he was standing still being fitted for robes, so it's not like he got the chance to see him swaggering anyway. But there's no doubt he does it now, walking through the corridors of Hogwarts with his head in the air, his nose up, tilted back so that it exposes the line of his throat. Harry watches his throat a lot. Ron made an approving noise when he noticed for the first time, and patted him on the back. "That's the way of it, mate," he said. "Learn exactly where the jugular is, so you can go for it when he turns into a Death Eater." Hermione had been close enough to hear Ron say that, and she hadn't been pleased at all. But Harry leaves him to work that out. He's got quite expert at everything to do with that lately, from melting away with a shrug and a smile when they try to use him as mediator in arguments, to pulling a pillow over his head when Ron's bed makes noises at nights that can't be due to the springs. Harry practically has permission then to watch Draco swaggering around. And yes, he's swaggering. What else, Harry thinks, can you call that roll of his hips, the way he turns his head to look over one shoulder when he thinks someone is watching him, the radiation of his smoke from his face through various spots of his body. His hands are always in motion, or just stopped out of motion, calling attention to his cheekbones, cupping his delicate jaw, spread along the hip that's quivering on the edge of motion itself. Harry watches a lot. He has reason to. It was the swagger that first carried him and Draco into each other. After all, one evening, when Harry was on his way to the kitchens for some food after a busy day of sulking, because there'd been another false story in the papers, and Draco has been going somewhere. Draco still doesn't tell him half of what he's up to, and because it doesn't lead to any broken laws or his friends bruised and bleeding that Harry can see, Harry's inclined to let it go. Draco hit him hard enough to make him sit down and drop the cloak. Harry spluttered and grabbed for it, but by then Draco had stepped on the trailing edge and got it away from him. He looked up and saw Draco clutching a handful of what looked like silken grey darkness, staring down at him with big eyes. "The rumors are true," Draco murmured, in a voice that teased the edges of Harry's awareness. He tried to remember if it had always done that, or only since they came back to Hogwarts to repeat their 7th year. But Draco was continuing. and Harry had to focus on the sense of his words, not the sound of them. "You do still act like a child in spite of being a hero." "Oi!" Harry bounced to his feet, reaching out for the cloak. Draco swirled it away from him without thought and without effort. Harry folded his arms across his stomach and exhaled hard, biting his lip to keep down the outrage he wanted to shout. There were patrolling prefects not too far away. "Okay, what do you want for it?" he asked, when they stood there for several seconds and Draco showed no sign of either returning the cloak or running away to chuckle maniacally about having it. "Figure out something for me to want." Draco swaggered forward a step and leaned against the wall. Harry glared at him. "Can be money. I have that," Draco said, beginning to count things off on his fingertips. "Thanks for your interference, by the way. So you've practically given permission not to accept it from you." "Can't be freedom from my parents." "I have that." "Gryffindor is trailing Slytherin house points at the moment, and we both know that asking you to throw the Quidditch match isn't something you'll do anyway." He smiled at Harry and lifted his hand in one of those gestures that framed his face, as if asking the world how it lived with his handsomeness looking at it every day. "Figure it out, Potter." Harry felt his frustration rearing up inside him, scraping its claws against his ribs the way his chest monster had done with Ginny a few years ago. Maybe it was that which gave him the idea, or the story in the paper that morning which had insinuated that the Weasleys were his secret harem of lovers, including the male ones. Maybe it was the simple desire to see some expression on Draco's face other than smugness or the blank fear Harry had seen during most of his trial. Either way, he stepped forwards and pressed his lips to Draco's, holding out one hand so that he could catch the cloak when the bastard dropped it. Draco choked, which was more or less ideal. His mouth opened, which wasn't, but Harry kept his lips pressed firmly to the outside of his mouth, working around it now and then, tapping his tongue here and there so that he could distract Draco from any thoughts forming in his head. Draco kept making these little gasping sounds which made Harry want to laugh. He pulled back before the impulse could overcome him and he could stick his tongue inside. Then he pulled on the cloak, still caught in Draco's unmoving fingers. It seemed that he became more possessive and clutchy when surprised. That didn't surprise Harry at all, when he thought about it. Draco stared at him, eyes crossed and face flushed. Harry tipped him a wink and started to drag the cloak back over his head. Once he darted into the shadows, he defied even someone who'd been staring at him to see the shimmer of the cloak any more. But then Draco moved. He probably swaggered, although Harry wasn't looking directly at him, so he can't swear to that now, and was dragging him close, hands in his shirt and robes, pulling him to a body as firm as a wall. Harry dropped the cloak again, and Draco kicked it away from him instead of picking it up this time. "Malfoy, what the hell?" And then Draco shut him up with another kiss, one in which his tongue definitely swaggered back and forth across the expanse of Harry's mouth, conquering the palate, soothing the savage tongue, thoughtfully sampling the teeth, and in general dominating the battlefield. Harry was breathless by the time he finished, although all finished really meant was that he pulled back far enough to let Harry breathe. "What?" Harry began again. "You figure out what I wanted," Draco said. "So you get the cloak back, though I'd be amazed if you could think of that right now." And he curved one hand around Harry's hip and one around his face and kissed him again, this time more strongly, more softly, more insistently. Harry did remember the cloak, but only in time to fling it over them so they could sneak into another room before someone else came to visit the kitchens and found them there. Watching Draco now, as he walks from potions to transfiguration with his eyes on the ceiling, leaving his feet to take care of themselves among the peasants, Harry nods. is a swagger. It means that no one notices the way Draco's eyes move in a swift dart from the ceiling to Harry, or the way they linger and brighten and burn.